Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to your favorite regulatory news channel, the CRR III channel of PwC. My name is Martin.Neisen. I am a partner with PwC and I am today your host. Regarding my background, I'm leading the Global Basel IV initiative of PwC and I'm also leading the Risk and Regulation division here in Frankfurt. Today we are going to speak again about the European Banking Package 2021, which was published in the end of October this year. And like always, we want to pick out one special detail that we want to analyze together with you. And today we will pick one topic that is located in the CRR, the CRR III, and it's, I would say, the most discussed topic within the Basel IV framework, and that is the new output floor, the new capital floor. And as quick background information, what means capital floor? Capital floor means that there will be a kind of floor of the RWA where a bank cannot fall below that RWA. And to analyze that, like always, I'm doing that not alone. I have a real expert today with me. It's Abdellah.mbarki from the PwC office in Amsterdam. He's the deputy leader of the Global Basel IV initiative. Abdellah, welcome. Hoe gaat het? Salam alaikum.
Good day, Martin. Wie geht's?
Sehr gut.
Very good, very good. Thank you for welcoming me in Frankfurt.
Thank you.
Very pleased to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you here. Abdellah, you are an absolutely expert on Basel IV, and we are working on this topic already for many, many years, and before that on Basel III. One of the most important topics is the output floor, the capital floor.
Yeah.
Maybe before we go into the details, could you please give us an overview about the reasons why actually must there be an output floor?
Yeah, so hello everyone. Yeah, I think it's, as you said, one of the actually most important topics, especially obviously for the internal models banks. The idea of the output floor is that actually with different studies in the past by the Basel Committee, by the EBA, that there is quite some divergence by way of applying internal models. So you would see out of this research that, you know, banks with similar type of portfolios would actually calculate or run different outcomes by way of risk weights and risk-weighted assets. So to actually align that more as a fallback type of approach, the output floor is actually implemented or actually proposed now for implementation in Europe to basically avoid that, you know, significant divergence and differences between the different banks.
Thank you very much, Abdellah, for that first insights. Abdellah, in our previous episodes, we were highlighting the changes within the standardized approach for credit risk, the new standardized approach for market risk under FRTB. We were analyzing the new standardized approach for operational risk. Maybe you could also give us more details about how actually to calculate the capital floor.
Yeah, so I think the output floor will be a bit of a challenge, honestly, because it is based on the standardized approach for all risk types. And whilst the standardized approach is basically the more easier way of calculating RWA, one have to bear, of course, in mind that the output floor is specifically designed for banks that actually apply internal models. So especially banks that have actually high use of internal models, which is actually in Germany, the Netherlands and the Nordics, they obviously have either very small or little application of standardized approach or not at all, which means that they don't have actually all the systems and potentially data and so on in place to be able to calculate the standardized approach. So they have to, of course, have that in place and have to have the right, means in place to be able to calculate. And then you basically calculate the standardized approach for all risk types, and that you apply by this 72.5%. I'll get later into that there's, of course, transition, but the idea is 72.5% multiplied by the RWA calculated under all the standardized approaches would be basically the minimum RWA. Meaning that if your, let's say, own approaches, internal models approach, are higher, you still would stick to that. If not, then you have to top up to get to the 72.5% of standardized approach. That's basically the, say, the, easy way of explaining the calculation.
Of course, in detail it's much more complicated.
Yeah, in detail it's really, I think, complicated because there is a transition effect. And I think on top of that, there's also double transition effect because the output floor is transitioned, but then also within the standardized approach there are also transition of the standardized approach. So you of course have to implement that correctly, and then the transition effect of the output floor. And then on top of that, there has been of course quite some debate about the output floor and how that would actually hamper, funding in Europe and economy and so on. There has been, quite some, I think, well, let's call it lobbying to actually try to change the implementation in Europe as compared to the Basel proposals. We have had this, I think, debate about the so-called single stack or the parallel stack approach. In the parallel stack approach, you would actually look at, say, Pillar 1 Basel approach. The output floor would be, let's say, an additional, call it buffer, and then you would compare it with normal, let's say, Pillar 1, the Pillar 2 requirements, other buffers, guidance, and then would only take the highest of the two. And now, and the single stack would be just, you take Pillar 1, you add basically the output floor, and then do all the other buffers on top of that. And that's where the, basically, EU proposal has landed on, which is, you could say in line with the Basel proposals.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Abdellah. There is one thing, because you mentioned if the EU implementation is in line actually with proposals of the Basel Committee, and there's one thing that was also discussed a lot parallel to the parallel stack approach and simple stack approach, and that is the level of application, consolidated level versus single entity.
Yes.
The EU found a unique way, I would say. Could you say a few words about that, and what is the challenge there?
It's a unique way, and I have to admit that I had to read it a couple of times and look up the formulas and what they are trying to do actually. But basically, it's on a consolidated level, and at individual level, you still keep basically the unfloored RWA. But what they have done, they've said, in other EU member state, if there is a financial holding company, mixed financial holding company, or an institution, you basically, or parent institution, which means you have to have a subsidiary also in that country, you basically calculate, what your stake is in the output floor at the consolidated level. The way basically you do that, you calculate the sub-consolidated kind of output floor. You compare that, you take that as a proportion of all the output for all the other member state entities, which gives you a percentage, and that percentage you multiply by the group consolidate output floor. And that is basically the allocation of the output floor to you as this specific EU member state institution, parent institution, mixed financial holding company, or financial holding company. Which I, of course, trying to explain this, I actually know that it's in a way complex, but again, I have to say, when also myself, it was, as you say, Martin, a bit of a surprise that the EU came up with this interesting way of approaching it.
It's definitely creative, I would say. Yeah. But the reason behind it is quite interesting. I had a conversation with representatives of the EU Commission, and the reason is in the end, when they explained it to me, is quite straightforward. The reason is simply, if you have subsidiaries or subgroups in other EU member states, then of course the local regulators, they don't want that the levels of capital ratios does not fall because no floor is applied. So on group level, yes, there is sufficient capital, but within these member states where the subsidiary is located, there is not enough capital. And in the end, when a bank gets into trouble, it's always the national regulator that has to deal with it, and they simply want to prevent the member states of supporting these kind of subsidiaries.
That is sufficiently capitalized indeed. Also
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, but hard to understand and very complex to calculate. So that is definitely something for you, my dear viewers, that you should consider in your impact calculations. I mean, the capital floor altogether is already extremely complicated, and especially because the standardized approach is so much more important. So it's not only that you have to apply the new rules to the internal models, but also the standardized approach, and you have to try to optimize it, of course, and that is a completely new situation for most of the banks. But maybe, Abdellah, another question that I would like to ask you regarding the impact of the output floor. You were performing many impact calculations with other EU member states on global level. Maybe you can give an overview what you have observed. What are the challenges regarding the impact?
Yeah, so of course there's the operational impact, especially again for the banks that apply internal models. Then you'll see that, and I referred to it before, is the countries with the highest use actually of internal models, which is the Netherlands, Germany, Nordics.
Absolutely.
There the impact obviously is higher, simply because they have relatively lower RWAs because of the use of internal models, and then with kicking in of the output floor would increase basically their RWAs quite significantly. So they will be basically constrained by the standardized approach and the output floor. Then in some other countries where the use of internal models is less, then you'll see that the impact is less. We even have actually, or there are banks where actually the internal models is binding or a constraint because the output floor is still lower than basically their own use.
Also that is
That's
possible.
also possible. That's why I think you referred to making impact calculations. I mean, of course, the European Commission in their proposals, they say, well, the impact is X, Y, Z. It's limited, blah blah blah. But to be honest, I think that's, in my view, I think that doesn't help a lot, because you read it as a bank, you say, well, no, my impact is much higher, or some banks are actually lower. Some banks are actually reducing, especially standardized banks are actually reducing their RWO. So that's by way of, I think, just the capital impact, operational impact, and then of course then the second round, or maybe even third round, is what then? So, well, capital is increasing, which obviously has an impact on profitability. And you'll then have to look at what is basically, where does this marginal capital requirement come from? Then we get into the discussion about how to allocate the output floor to which portfolios, because, there is some type of compensating effect if you still have a part of your business on standardized and then a big part on IRB or other, let's say, internal models. There, questions, how do we allocate the output floor? And we have, of course, our allocation tool that we have developed, where we basically look at what is the most optimal way of allocating. That, let's say, the third element. And I think then the fourth element in basically doing your assessment and your calculations and your business originating credits, you actually not only just calculate now the output floor and the impact, but you have to that also on, let's say, during the tenor of the credit. And you have to take into account, the tenor of your whole portfolio and how that will, affect, and where will be actually the output floor binding, to what extent, and will we be, let's say, the standardized approach be a constraint, and to what extent. And that you, of course, have to take into account in pricing. And in fact, as you know, Martin, we've had many discussions with many banks all over the globe. We're not aware of, well, I'll just put it probably a bit mildly, of a lot of banks that actually have already, put this very well in place. And that, I think, quite a challenge. But there's also upside for banks to do this actually properly, also by way of taking that into pricing and business origination.
Thank you very much, Abdellah. Yeah, I think we can summarize here that the capital floor is, from the calculation side, very, very complicated and complex and needs a lot of implementation. But also when it comes to the business impact, it's extremely challenging because you have this floor compensation effect. And of course, even when the idea of the European Commission to apply it only on consolidated level is quite good and in favor of the banks, but with a additional requirement to calculate it also on sub-consolidated level or a single entity level for other EU member states, that's making it even more complicated how to include that into pricing or your business decisions. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Abdellah, when I introduced you, I said you are the Deputy Basel IV leader on global level. You are an experienced partner from PwC in the Netherlands. And therefore, I would like to ask you also for a specific impact that you have observed within the Dutch banks. Like, are there any special circumstances, special challenges that you would like to mention?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple, but I think mostly this output floor, the impact it has, it basically says standardized approach, corporates, no collateral taken into account. Whilst we have many businesses in the Netherlands, for example, Agri, where, highly collateralized, that's taken into account in the IRB models, but not under the standardized approach. So I think that's, a big impact that we see in the Netherlands. Yeah, I think the European Commission did an attempt to basically hamper that by the lower risk weight for unrated corporates for quite substantially long period of time, even beyond actually the output floor 2030. But still, the effect could be still quite significant. Whilst if you think about it, risk-wise, you're just ignoring collateral. So I think that's one of the major impacts we see in the Netherlands. And then I think for the IRB banks on top of this, I mean, I know this is a widely known issue around data, but we really see challenges with having the right data in place to determine the capital requirement. Just a simple one, and that is again attempt of European of the Commission to maybe dampen a bit the effect is, for example, simple things of loan commitments. Many banks you'll find in their systems a commitment is captured, but whether it is really a commitment, like the CRR is now defining or improving the definition, or it's not, a legal commitment, and to what extent, and then would you then apply 10% or a 40%, credit conversion factor? Those, when we were doing, and we've done a lot of work in this space, is just finding the right data to come to a conclusion. And that goes also, for example, specialized lending, for what type of specialized lending, and is it in still development phase, or is it already finished? Will be also a problem with, residential real estate. So all these, really what you would normally not think about, because you just think about, the complex calculation, but just having the data to be able to make the calculation. That's what I, in the past, and you said it right, I mean, we've been doing this for many years now, it takes a bit of time before it's, EU regulation. But that's, I think, my personal, takeaway from all the work we have done so far.
Yeah, thank you very much, Abdellah. I think that summarized really what the challenges of Basel IV or the implementation of the EU Banking Package 2021 is about. Like there are these big topics like the output floor, where there is a lot of technical knowledge necessary, but there are also these many smaller changes that add up, of course. Both with regard to the effort for the technical implementation, but also with regard to the RWA impact. And that is very important that you have a good view on that.
Yeah, true. It's, basically both sides of the coin. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you very much, Abdellah. It was a pleasure having you here. And I would like also to thank our viewers for paying attention to this video. If you have any further questions regarding the EU Banking Package 2021 or specifically to the output floor, do not hesitate to contact us. All the contact details are in the comment field here on this YouTube channel, so you only have to write to your European Basel IV contact or global Basel IV contact, and we are more than happy to support you. So thank you very much again for your attention, and thank you very much, Abdellah.
Thank you, Martin.
Cheers.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.